Hi, and welcome to the Skincarma Pod. I'm Carmine, the creator and voice of the Skincarma Blog. With more than 25 years in beauty as a brand builder, copywriter, and skincare junkie, I'm putting my product wisdom and expertise to work demystifying skincare. Today on the Skincarma Pod, I'm welcoming to the podcast one of my favorite people in all of beauty, Mark Curry, co-founder and CEO of the INKEY List. I'm a day one fan of the brand, going back to the very beginning of the Skincarma blog. INKEY was co-founded by Mark Curry and his partner, Colette Laxton, in 2018, a year after I started the blog. I bought every single product they offered before they were even in the US market. I think they launched with like 10 or 12 products, and it cost me $50 plus shipping from the UK. INKEY was one of the first of what I term democratically priced brands. They offer high quality products at super affordable prices. I always looked at the brand as bringing great skincare to everyone, wherever they are, no matter their age or economic status. Everyone deserves great skin, right? According to the brand, they've touched 7 million people. That's a lot of healthy skin barriers. In addition to his responsibilities as founder and CEO, Mark is the brand's chief chemist and formulator. We share a passion for science and ingredients, and whenever I'm fortunate enough to spend time with Mark, we walk out on formulas, ingredient innovation, and the state of the beauty business. I meant it when I said he's one of my favorite people in beauty. He's also one of the smartest and most personable. A cool guy next door founder of a multi-million-dollar skincare brand. And I'm honored he's paused everything he does in a day to chat with me. Let's talk to Mark. Mark, hi.
Carmine, it is my absolute pleasure to pause everything in a day just to have a moment with you. So thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Mark. This is awesome. I'm so excited. I had just launched the podcast, and we were like, it literally, I had published like one episode or two episodes, and we were at an INKEY event in the city, and you were like, I'll come on your podcast. And I was like, I've never had a guest on before. Let me iron out some kinks. So I've ironed out the kinks with about a dozen guests, all my guinea pigs, and this should be smooth sailing for us.
And that's all in the space of a couple of months. So you've done awesome. Congrats.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, it's come together nicely. So, before we get into the nitty gritty of the business and everything I love about INKEY, and, I want to hear how INKEY began and what inspired it, but I want to hear more about your background because your background fascinates me, to be honest.
I would call it a checkered past. Other would call it a veritable cornucopia of experiences. But yeah, so I've always had since school. I was intoxicated by the possibility of science. That's not to say that I was a good kid at school. I thought I was going to be a soccer player, and so didn't really pay attention at school until they told me apparently I wasn't going to be a soccer player, and then I panicked and had to kind of really knuckle down on my studies when I was in high school. So, um, but science was always what I loved. I kind of got near enough full marks, and then did all the sciences in my college phase of life before ultimately going on to study what I really love, which was microbiology and virology. I just could not get my head around how these tiny things were probably the source of life, let alone had more of an impact on humans and the planet than most people dare think about. And so, yeah, I just was just super curious about them, and my science teacher. I didn't go to a very good school at all. They tried their best, but it is what it is, and it was, it was just a normal school with relatively poor kids from all different ethnicities and backgrounds. It was just a really cool school, but not a very academic one. And the one teacher that I connected with, the science teacher and the PE teacher, they just said, just do what you're passionate about. And I think that's stayed with me a long time. And I'm a big fan of everyone doing what they love, and the rest will take care of itself. And so I followed that thread, and it took me to college. When I was the first person in my family to go to college. So it was all opening your eyes to these posh kids who
Mm-hmm.
have had wildly different experiences and doing 100% of your time on science. It was a cool time for me, and a transformational time that I'll come to later in terms of understanding the impact that education has on your just trajectory in life.
Yeah,
And
yeah. You know, it's amazing the influence a single teacher can have on you, as trite as it sounds, but it is real. And I wouldn't be a writer today and have studied language if it weren't for my high school English teacher, who, like, course corrected, no pun intended, she course corrected my perception of myself. You know, I was super shy. I was a fat kid and I had tons of insecurities. I hated my name. Can you imagine? Like openly hating your own name. And, you know, she loved my name and she thought it was so romantic and so Italian and, you know, all of that. And I adored her. I idolized her before any of that even came to the fore. And it just made me want to do what she did. And so I became an English teacher and a writer.
that's an amazing story, and probably, it can be told 1,000 times over through
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Because I ultimately went on to be a teacher.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
I know.
You
I
weren't kidding
realized.
about the cornucopia.
Yeah. So in my first year of college, I heard that Teach for America was coming to the UK. Uh, and it was everything I thought from a values perspective it should be, setting high expectations and high bars for kids that maybe have been written off, and dealing with the kids in tough environments that I'd seen in the past myself. And something really connected with me, and I just knew that was it. I obviously went to the banks and did some internships there and thought they were a rude. I'm probably not allowed to, a word I'm probably not allowed to say on your podcast, and it just wasn't for me.
Hmm.
But yeah, I was pretty much set on that's what I wanted to do, and give back in the first instance. And at the same time, keep teaching in your pocket, travel the world, all these kind of lofty ambitions that young Mark had.
Right.
But yeah, and it was only ever going to be science. And it was an unbelievable eye-opening time. It was tremendously difficult, guns and knives in school, like you name it, tremendously difficult, unbelievably great kids, horrendous parents.
Mm.
But a function of where we are as a society. But I loved every minute of it. I just was intellectually bored, which is why I moved on. But to your point on impact, in recent times, actually, when INKEY was just getting going,
Hmm.
a couple of students have reached out to me and said, "Mr. Curry, I'm doing this now, and like it's because of you." I was like, literally, and Colette will tell you, I'm
Yeah.
very rarely emotional, never too high, never too low, pretty stable.
Yeah.
And I was really emotional because she had a really tough gig at home, and she'd gone on through everything, had become a PhD in nutrition. Just all because I spent some time with her, gave her a few books, and it's frightening how the impact teachers can have on kids.
Yeah. It's super cool. So you mentioned Inky. So how did that transition come about? Let's get deeper into the cornucopia, Mark.
So, speeding up, then went into industry and learnt about these things called brands. I'd never done business
Okay.
before, so I
Yeah.
learnt about brands on a course that I did whilst I was teaching, to kind of keep myself busy. And I just thought, these are cool. How can you use them to kind of bedazzle people? Went and worked in the food industry at a big company called Mars, that not just the chocolate bars, they
Hmm.
do
Yeah.
human food and pet food. So learn about business there and brands. And then had a conversation with someone who said, "Come and learn about retail and come work for me before you get too senior." And so went across to Boots the Chemist over here in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
That's for American audience, it's a little bit like Ulta. It's got some prestige brands, it's got some mass, but it's also got like pharmacy and some other things in there, and some food as well. So went to work there for a couple of years, and I think it's there where I saw um, my first interaction with beauty.
Right.
It's there where I actually saw my first interaction with healthcare as well, and I just loved both. And I loved the big guys that were so smart, so intelligent, knew the consumer inside out, and were really strategic in how they activated things. But I love the smaller guys, the ones with the crazy ideas, the ones with the passion and the energy to make it happen. And my naive thinking was, so I could probably do both. I could be that guy that does both, right there in the middle with the passion and the energy and a little bit of new nous and know-how, and I'm just going to start my own thing. And I started my own thing, and things were going okay for a little while, and quickly I was on my own doing this at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my way, and it was really too hard, and made some bad decisions, and it all ended pretty badly. But I was still inspired by the journey, and I didn't want to go back to a more traditional corporate job. I wanted to plow my own lane and really do something as an entrepreneur. And that's when I reached out to Colette and said, look, I've got an idea. I think it'll work. The strategy is right. The category is really right for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't talk English at the best of times, and I certainly don't get the consumer as well as I really need to. I need someone to help me, and that was the start of ultimately INKEY being born.
Wow. That's cool. I never knew any of that. And I said in the intro before you came on that I don't even know if you know this, that I I had read about this new brand called Inky, and everything was like $6. It was something like that. And it was like super ingredient focused and really smart, and you weren't in the US yet. And I went online. I think it was at Cult Beauty, maybe?
That's
Was
right.
that,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
that was
right.
your initial
That's right.
retailer in the UK. And I bought everything. And it was like $50. I think it was 10 products, maybe. Maybe it was $60, something like that, right? 10 or 12 products. And I remember thinking, God, it's so expensive to ship all this from the UK. I paid so much in shipping at the time, but I had to try those products. And I was so fascinated by this concept of what I call a democratically priced brand.
Yes.
It's ingredient focused. It's really good skincare that anybody can afford. And I remember thinking, there's so many people who can't afford to have good skin. And this is a brand that's creating that pathway for people. And I don't know, was that your intention?
Yeah. Yeah. So behind the brand really stands the category, and you and I talk about this all the time when
Yeah.
we meet up in New York. But in the category, we were looking at the dynamics of the category, because skincare has been around for a long while. It's got really expensive good products and bad products. It's got really cheap good products and bad products.
Yeah.
So it's not about the products. It's about actually the connection from consumers to those products to kind of drive usage and drive trial and drive ultimately penetration of a format or a particular ingredient. And so there just seems so much opportunity. And our hypothesis was that it's understanding what to use is the challenge, because editors have been talking about it for years, writers have been talking about it for years, people were discussing it on forums and just confusing themselves. It was the connection with the consumer to what their skin needs was the gap. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where we kind of lasered in. Now, it transpired in how we kind of built the rest of it that you know, we didn't set out to create an ingredient brand. What we set out to create is that connection, and how do we remove the barriers to really zoom in on that connection. And we did it in two ways. One, it was how do we ensure that people aren't excluded? It wasn't that we said we wanted it to be the cheapest. We just didn't want people to be excluded.
Mm-hmm.
And secondarily, in order to do that, you have to get rid of all the faff. and the BS and the bullshit around it, right? You have to not get precious about the types of packs and finishes that you want. You can't be precious around filling it with a multitude of stuff.
Yeah.
Ultimately, actives count, and actives are doing the grunt work and having the impact on your skin. It's what's inside that counts, and everything else is a choice. And that was fundamentally the DNA of the brand.
Wow. So it's amazing. That wasn't the specific intent, wasn't that single ingredient focus, but it did kind of start that way, as I recall. Like, and I feel like you being a science nerd, if you will, you were gravitating towards ingredients that were super cool and had potential. Like, I remember that turmeric moisturizer. I mean, turmeric, and it actually had a smell, right? But
Yeah, how does smell?
I loved that product so much.
I mean, I loved it as well. And lots of people still talk to us about those initial. You were absolutely dead on, by the way. We launched 12 products.
Uh,
There was like 9 core products and 3 things that we really weren't clear about and
right.
sure about. But turmeric moisturizer was one of them. And but we just wanted to give it a go
Yeah.
because, we've always, I think I've got right here beside me, there's a bit of artwork that says inspire and be inspired. And
Hmm.
that's always been a real tenet of how we do things. And so we just wanted to kind of get lost in the possibilities. And with us, coming from that central theme that it's actives that matter. So as long as there's data on it, as long as the claims can stand up and be clear and simple, as long as the message and the use is easy,
Hmm.
and as long as the product is transformational, it could be on our to-do list. And I think as long as all those things are true, we're not scared to do anything. Because I think a lot of companies start at no and wait to be convinced. Whereas
Yeah.
actually we'd start at yes and go, no, we'd want to be on the leading edge of that conversation and on the front foot of the discussion. And that's why turmeric, when it trends, our job is to, okay, why is it important? What's the anti-inflammatory effects? Yada yada yada.
Hmm.
That's why we were the first on polyglutamic acid, succinic acid, tranexamic acid. You like everything that has got great data, great insights, and is able to have a true impact on people's skins and their unmet need. It's fair game that we would love to go after.
It's funny. I'm glad you brought those two ingredients up because I just thinking, okay, INKEY ingredient innovation. I remember the turmeric. Clearly, Ectoin is hot, and that's honestly my favorite product. My favorite skincare product in my routine is my Ectoin serum. But you're right. Polyglutamic acid. You taught me what that was. I had no idea. I'd never heard of that. Succinic acid. Never heard of it. I was like, I don't even know how to pronounce this. This is fascinating. And so, like, where does the ideas for ingredient innovation come from for you?
Probably 3 sources.
Hmm.
We're talking to consumers all day long. So our kind of Our Skinky team are talking to consumers, across the globe. And so we have a little bit of a read and pulse on, okay, what are they interested in, what they're hearing about. And so we get some feedback naturally from that. Secondarily, we do have great relationships with raw material suppliers who are doing some great things in terms of R&D. And there's conversations that we have with them, there's projects that we have with them that we think is interesting and that we need one another to unlock, because obviously their big play is obviously with the big guys. They make their money with the big guys, and that's where the volume is. But we see our role in supporting the breakout and being that disruptor that can bring it to market quicker. And actually now we're at a decent size and we can bring some decent volume. So we see ourselves as a real disruptor in that regard, to bring things first
Hmm.
and try, and with the caveat that the price needs to be democratic, to your point,
Right.
because there's no point us bringing something that's too expensive, that's not right and doesn't fit with our DNA. And the last part is just staying open as well to what's new. because there's always things coming through. There's always things that are happening in the higher end where they're able to kind of invest more money in R&D and just stay close to things and just watch that high level trend, and wanting to be, obviously with our Nottingham roots, a bit more of a Robin Hood figure of taking that technology or the idea of that technology and bringing it to people at a more affordable price point, quicker and easier than otherwise it stays beyond their reach.
Yeah, and we don't want that. So
No.
can we talk a little bit about the formulation process?
Mm.
How hard is it to make a product? And I remember us having a conversation about the trials and tribulations you went through making that incredible sunscreen. And
Yes.
so is sunscreen the hardest product you ever made?
Yeah. Yeah, that is because for good and bad reasons.
Hmm.
For the bad reasons, we set out to do an SPF 15 mineral back in 2018, and we had to pivot, and we started with a blend and couldn't make that work across all the skin tones, and ended up at chemical and 30 in terms of the first launch.
Hmm.
That project didn't stop. That was just version number 72, and we we needed to actually make some money out of
Right.
it and try and recoup back the investment that we put into developing that product. And so we launched that, but our SPF project didn't stop. We still, back to that first ambition of a genuine mineral sunscreen, SPF 50 for all skin tones, is and will but forever be the mission. That mission might be accomplished soon. Stay tuned.
Yay.
But the project was and has been the hardest. On the good side of that, it's with good reason too, because obviously it's a medical product. It's a drug. It needs to work.
Yeah.
People need confidence in it. The regulators need confidence in it, and so testing is a must. And there's, it's pretty scrupulous around the world, Australia, Canada, and the US and Europe. So that's good reason why it slows down and makes sure things are like present and correct. But at the time, I don't know if you remember, Carm, actually, the testing houses were a subject matter of
Yes,
conversation back in 2018, 2019, because
I
some testing
remember.
houses
Hmm.
were giving variable results. So we then, to cover our backs, had 3 different testing houses to make sure that what we actually had was definitely what we had and was verified.
Right. I do remember that. That was quite scandalous. And,
Mm.
I think a lot of consumers absorbed that and are still, you know, concerned whether their sunscreen works or not, right?
But even our so on this on our project, our secret project that's not so secret, even our new CMO Natalie, who you met last week or a couple of weeks ago,
Hmm.
even when she took like a lab sample of our new product out, she was like, "Mark, you sure this works? The texture's quite interesting." And she goes, "You sure this work? I could put it on my kids. Are you sure?" Like even she is like, "I'm not
Yeah.
going to believe you that it's SPF 54." So yeah, I think when things happen on products where it is so visceral, the impacts of it not going right, I think people do remember, like salmonella and
Yeah.
mad
Yeah.
cow does it, like these big things that happen and have big news stories, like they remain in the subconscious of
Yeah.
people
It plants a seed in the back of your mind. But
for sure.
I love that the dewy sunscreen. It's such a great formula, and the finish is incredible. And what I love most about it is that you overcome, and I talk about this all the time. You overcome the single objection people give, or the most common objection people give for not wearing sunscreen is that they hate how it feels on their face. And that product is amazing. It feels great.
Thank you so well. Like I say, it was 72 versions in, so hopefully we got some into there.
At least it wasn't 100.
This is true.
you
This is
know
true.
I feel like brands like to claim all the time, it took hundreds of tries, and I'm like, hundreds of tries to
Yeah,
make a peptide serum? Come on now.
yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think you got to understand what the formulation process, which is where this question started, that I probably didn't even answer. But But the way we formulate, some brands would go to a manufacturer and say, here's what can I just take what's off the shelf and I'm going to market it different, and that's cool, and all power to them.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might be a bit more organic and go, I want this product, here's a concept, but I want you to benchmark it against these things, and can you make it fit? But we do things a little differently. We start a little bit higher up the supply chain and go, right, the concept is this, therefore we want the main actives to be this collection of actives. Therefore, we need the base to be here. So we got the stable actives, or as bioavailable as possible, to make sure that we can get the claims that we want, and everything else just cut it back, and we get the formula that we want from there. So our formulation ethos and our formulation process hasn't changed throughout. What does that mean? It means that some projects are tougher than others. So SPF, as an example, is tougher than others.
Yeah.
Our azelaic acid was tougher than others just because of the stability issues that comes with that product,
Yeah.
and tackiness around it. Our original hyaluronic acid of the first 12 products was our toughest assignment, to make sure that we got rid of the tack, changing the different
Right.
grades of
Right.
hyaluronic acid. And so every formula presents a challenge when you are making it from scratch. But if you were having a general aqueous serum with a fairly well-known peptide and delivery system and stability system, it's preference after that you change things, and you don't need too many rounds.
Right. So let's talk about your most innovative product to date, and that is this one, Exosome Hydra Glow Complex. Awesome,
Yes.
awesome product, super pleasurable, very on trend. I told you that I was at the Beauty Matter Future 50 event all day yesterday, and boy, did between exosomes and longevity, it was like that was the topic. Those were the hot topics all day, and it's pretty incredible that you brought an exosome product to market so quickly.
Yeah. So this started 18 months ago.
What?
Yeah, it started 18 months ago, where we started having conversations with suppliers around them,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to find one that could vaguely cost in. So back to that principle on data, price, claim, ease, transformational product. We started, I was, obviously know what they are, and knew what they were and knew where they were being used, which is in the, medi-clinics and medi-spas, et cetera, around the world, certainly the Western world.
Mm-hmm.
But human derived, which brings supply chain challenges because you need them to be stored in cold temperatures and blah, yada, yada, yada. So really challenging supply chain, and inadvertently expensive as an active ingredient, but some super powerful impacts that you can get out of them. So staying close to, okay, how are people dealing with that? How are they creating them artificially? How are they creating them in biofermenters, et cetera, and who was doing it, and who could we partner with to make sure that we were one of the first people to make sure that we can get it so it's stable at room temperatures, and therefore we can put it into topical products, was on our hit list for a while. So yeah, we just we went far and wide with it, and luckily we are on the leading edge, or the leading pack of people that are bringing it to market. And I think for me, this typifies INKEY. It's
Mm-hmm.
the latest thing as early as possible.
Mm-hmm.
It is, a little bit out there from a science perspective, but we're trying to make it easy in terms of just healthy skin glow.
Mm-hmm.
It's packed full of not just exosomes, but other ingredients to give a full impact on the benefit of your skin. And it's all for $22.
Yeah.
So it is probably a very archetypal INKEY product, and I think it will be, by the first few weeks of sales and consumer sentiment around it, I think it will be a hero, actually.
That's super
Yeah.
cool. So you've kind of gotten your groove, right? Like, it's not cookie cutter, but it makes complete sense. It's very logical, and you know how to make a winning product. And so you I guess you mentioned that you started this exosome project 18 months ago. I'm not asking you to reveal anything now. I mean, 18 months from now, 2 years, 5 years from now, like, is this the path? these really incredible breakthrough ingredients that you're finding in different places and bringing to the masses, if you will? Is that the intent?
I think, yeah. I mean, me and you talk about biohacking and senolytics and topics like this, and I think it's super interesting. But there's a few things that need to come together for it to be right. So I think you think about it as a funnel,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got all these interesting ideas that are very top of funnel, and they just might not be able to percolate down because some things are just beyond us in terms of price right now. We need some other things to happen so it goes the right way and to make it more democratic. The technology might not be proven. An
Right.
example of that is kind of like NAD for me, topically. Like super interested in NAD ingested. There's some pros and cons from an injectables perspective that,
Mm-hmm.
some people might fall on one camp or another. And there certainly needs to be more evidence and more experiments into it. But actually, there is some real core molecular science there that absolutely makes sense on it being an absolute power product from a metabolism perspective.
Yeah.
But and I'm really intrigued by it. But actually, topically, is it going to be interesting? Yeah, I'm not so sure. There's not,
Yeah.
there's been no clinical data that has a big impact on skin as much as you'd want it to be just yet. So between price, data, the ability to create some good claims around things, all things have to come together in a really timely fashion in order for it to kind of come through the innovation funnel and kind of pop out then at the right time for the consumer to be accepting of it. And I think we've done some things historically that maybe could have been great, but we maybe didn't get the comms right. We've done
Mm-hmm.
some things historically that were probably a bit too late as well, or late for us if as people that were wanting to be there first and leading edge of innovation where consumers expect us to be. And so there's a big timing element to it that you just have to be cognizant of and open to as well, because something things happen for a reason, and you just got to be in the right place at the right time. I think I always compare the timing and the product thing to songs, right? There is
Mm-hmm.
how many amazing songs in the world of all different flavors and varieties and anything, but only a few songs, and particularly only a couple of songs per artist, really bubble up to the top of everyone's consciousness and stand the test of time. And I think product development is a little bit like that.
Wow. So you're like a conductor. That's really what you are. You're the master conductor at the INKEY List. I have to go back and re-record the intro. That's funny.
Anyone who's heard me sing or try and play piano would absolutely say no to that.
Right here, right here. I tried every instrument as a kid. Not my forte. Stick with what you love and what you're passionate about, right? Bingo.
Exactly right. Exactly
Listen,
right.
Mark, this was amazing. I'm so honored to have you on. Thank you so much.
Carmine, thank you for having me. Keep lifting the lid on the industry and what it's like in various different guises and roles and all different facets of it, because yeah, it's right that everyone knows.
Will do. I promise. Thank you,
Good
Mark.
man. Have a
Ciao.
good day.
All right, you too. So, how cool was that? Oh my God. I am so jazzed about that conversation. I totally just wanted to wonk out on ingredients and skincare, and I could have gone on for hours. I'm so appreciative. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Mark, for taking the time. I hope you guys learned a lot about ingredient innovation and INKEY and got just kind of got a few more insights about how the business works, because that part of it is super, super interesting. Products just appear on the shelves, of course, for most of us, but there's a whole BTS going on that you don't know about, and it's just fascinating. And the inspiration for ingredients in particular, like why exosomes all of a sudden, it's just fascinating to me. Hey, thank you for listening to the Skincarma Pod. Find more insights, real talk, and reviews of my favorite skincare products on the Skincarma blog at skincarma.com. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please rate and review this episode. It helps me to reach more listeners. Ciao.